Hello, wonderful listeners, and welcome to our channel. We're so glad you've chosen to spend some time with us today. If you enjoy heartwarming tales of loyalty and perseverance, please hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're retuning in from. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin our story through hunger and tears, a loyal dog's journey. In the quiet heart of Willow Creek, nestled between rolling hills and a meandering river, lived a dog whose spirit shone as brightly as his golden fur. His name was Buddy, a magnificent golden retriever mixed with eyes that held the wisdom of an old soul and a tail that wagged with an infectious joy. Buddy wasn't just a pet. He was the beating heart of the small, loving family he belonged to. There was Alara, a girl of 10 with hair the color of autumn leaves and a laugh that could chase away any shadow. And then there was Silas, Alara's grandfather, a man whose hands were calloused from years of working the land, but whose touch was as gentle as a summer breeze. Their home, a weathered cottage with a sprawling garden, was a sanctuary of love and simple pleasures. From the moment Alara, then a toddler, first laid eyes on the fluffy, clumsy puppy, an unspoken pact was formed. Buddy became her shadow, her confidant, her protector. They spent countless hours exploring the woods behind their cottage, Buddy bounding ahead, his nose twitching with every new scent, Alara following, her imagination ignited by his boundless energy. They would wade in the shallow parts of the river, Buddy playfully splashing water, Alara giggling as he shook himself dry, sending droplets flying. In the evenings, with the scent of Silas's pipe tobacco mingling with the aroma of freshly baked bread, Buddy would curl at their feet by the crackling fireplace, his head resting on Alara's lap, soaking in the warmth of their presence. Silas, a man of few words but profound feelings, saw in Buddy a reflection of the unwavering loyalty he cherished. He'd often watch them, a soft smile gracing his lips, his heart swelling with a quiet contentment. Buddy's presence was a balm, especially after Alara's parents had passed away years ago, leaving a void that even time struggled to fill. The dog's boundless affection and unwavering cheerfulness were a constant reminder of life as simple joys, a steady anchor in their world. Buddy seemed to understand the unspoken grief that occasionally settled over the cottage, offering a soft nudge of his head or a comforting paw, his presence a silent promise of enduring companionship. Their days were a rhythm of peace. Mornings began with Buddy's enthusiastic greetings, a symphony of tail thumps against the floorboards and soft whimpers of excitement. Afternoons were for adventures, chasing squirrels that always seemed just out of reach, fetching sticks thrown with gusto by Alara, or simply lying in the sun-dappled grass, Buddy's head resting on Alara's chest as she read aloud from her favorite books. Evenings were for quiet companionship, the three of them a tableau of familial bliss. Buddy was more than a dog. He was a family member, deeply woven into the fabric of their lives, his loyalty an unshakable foundation. This golden bond, forged in shared laughter and silent understanding, was the most precious thing in their world, a treasure they believed would last forever, untouched by the world's harsh realities. Little did they know, the winds of change were already beginning to stir, threatening to test the very strength of this cherished connection. The gentle hum of daily life in Willow Creek began to subtly shift, like the faint rustle of leaves before a storm. Buddy, with his acute senses and intuitive nature, was the first to pick up on the changes. He noticed the way Silas's shoulders seemed to slump a little more each evening, the lines around his eyes deepening with a worry that transcended the usual concerns of an old farmer. Silas, who once moved with a sturdy gait, now walked with a slight shuffle, and his once hearty laughter was often replaced by a thoughtful silence, punctuated by long sighs. Buddy would often nudge his hand, a soft whine escaping his throat, as if to ask what troubled his beloved human. Alara, though still vibrant and full of youthful energy, also began to show signs of the growing unease. Her adventures with Buddy grew shorter, replaced by quiet afternoons spent by the window, her gaze distant. She would sometimes overhear hushed conversations between Silas and their neighbors about dwindling harvests, rising prices, and a general scarcity that was slowly tightening its grip on their small community. The once abundant market stalls in Willow Creek now seemed sparsely stocked, and the familiar faces of vendors often wore expressions of quiet desperation. The playful banter that used to fill the air was replaced by anxious murmurs, and even the birds seemed to sing a less joyous tune. Buddy felt the change in the air, a tension that was palpable even to his canine senses. The familiar scent of peace in their home was subtly mingled with an unfamiliar aroma, that of stress and uncertainty. He would watch Silas poring over ledgers late into the night, the flickering lamplight casting long, dancing shadows that mirrored the anxieties in the old man's heart. Silas, ever the protector, tried to shield Ilara from the full weight of their troubles, but the strain was undeniable. He spoke less of future plans for the farm and more of making do, of tightening their belts, and of the challenging times ahead for everyone in the valley. The economic hardship wasn't an isolated incident. It was a creeping blight affecting the entire region. The river, usually a lifeblood, had been unpredictable, and the soil, once fertile, seemed to yield less each season. Neighbors, once self-sufficient, now struggled to make ends meet, and many spoke of moving away, seeking opportunities in distant, unnamed cities. The thought of leaving Willow Creek, a place so deeply rooted in their family's history, was a painful one for Silas. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, seemed to echo the difficult decisions looming on the horizon. Buddy's usually buoyant spirit was occasionally dampened by the somber moods of his humans. He'd press close to Ilara, offering his warm presence as a silent comfort, or rest his head on Silas's knee, his eyes fixed on the old man's face, trying to decipher the unspoken worries. He knew with an instinct born of deep connection that something significant was coming. The world they knew, the stable, loving world of Willow Creek, was teetering on the edge of a precipice, and even in his innocent doggy heart, Buddy felt the tremor of impending change. The whispers were growing louder, transforming from faint murmurs into a persistent hum that hinted at a future far different from the tranquil present they had always known. A future that held both trials and profound tests of their family's unwavering bond. The whispers of change soon coalesced into an undeniable roar. The difficult decision had been made. Silas and Ilara could no longer sustain their life in Willow Creek. The farm, their ancestral home, had to be sold. It was a heartbreaking necessity, born of dwindling resources and Silas's declining health. The money from the sale, meager as it was, would allow them to seek a fresh start, perhaps with distant relatives in a new town, a place called Havenwood, rumored to still offer opportunities. But the departure meant leaving behind everything they knew, everything they loved, including the cottage that held generations of memories. Buddy, ever attuned to their emotions, felt the profound sadness that permeated the air. Ilara's laughter, once a daily symphony, was now a rare, fragile sound. Her eyes, usually bright with curiosity, often glistened with unshed tears. Silas moved through the house with a heavy heart, his hands lingering on familiar objects, a worn armchair, a framed photograph, as if imprinting their touch into his memory. The packing was a somber affair, each item carefully wrapped, each box filled with a mixture of hope and sorrow. Buddy would sit quietly, watching them, his head tilted, his brow furrowed with a canine understanding of their grief. One afternoon, as Silas was carefully dismantling an old wooden shelf, he paused, a deep sigh escaping his lips. He looked at Buddy, who had been lying by his feet, and then at Ilara, who was packing her few treasured books. He knelt, pulling Buddy close, burying his face in the dog's soft fur. "Oh, Buddy," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, This is going to be harder than anything we faced. Alara, seeing her grandfather's raw vulnerability, rushed to join them, wrapping her arms around both Silas and Buddy. In that moment, a silent pact was renewed, a promise of loyalty enduring through whatever trials lay ahead. Their departure day dawned gray and overcast, mirroring the mood of the small family. A borrowed truck, piled high with their meager possessions, idled in front of the cottage. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and unspoken goodbyes. Alara clung to Buddy, burying her face in his neck, her small body trembling with suppressed sobs. "Don't worry, Buddy," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We'll be together, always." Buddy licked her face, a comforting gesture trying to convey his own understanding and reassurance. Silas, with a final, lingering look at their home, helped Alara into the truck. Buddy, sensing the gravity of the moment, nudged at their legs, eager to join them. But then, Silas's expression shifted, a flicker of profound anguish crossing his face. Buddy can't come with us, Alara," he said, his voice barely a whisper, laden with a pain that tore at his very soul. "The landlord in Havenwood, he won't allow dogs. It's a small place, a temporary arrangement. We'll find a way, I promise, but for now, he has to stay with Mrs. Gable just for a little while." The words hung in the air like a death knell. Alara's eyes widened in horror, her breath catching in her throat. Buddy, sensing the shift, looked from Silas to Alara, his tail dropping, his joy replaced by a deep, unsettling confusion. This was not the plan. This was not the promise. The world, which had already begun to crumble, now shattered into a million pieces around them. The farewell, under duress, wasn't just to their home, but to the very essence of their family. A wrenching separation that would test the depths of a loyal dog's heart more profoundly than anyone could have imagined. The truck's engine sputtered to life, a harsh prelude to the agonizing goodbye. The words, "Buddy can't come with us," echoed in Alara's ears. A cruel, impossible sentence. Her small body stiffened, a silent scream trapped in her throat. Buddy, sensing her distress, whined softly, trying to nuzzle her hand, his tail offering a tentative wag. But there was no joy in it, only a desperate plea for understanding. Silas, his face etched with unspeakable pain, gently tried to pry Alara's fingers from Buddy's fur. "We'll come back for him, Alara, as soon as we can. Mrs. Gable will take good care of him." His voice was raspy, thick with unshed tears, a testament to the agony of his decision. But Alara was inconsolable. "No, Buddy has to come. He's family," she cried, her voice tearing at the quiet morning air. Buddy, seeing the raw anguish in her eyes, felt a primal fear grip his heart. He tried to follow her as Silas guided her towards the truck, but Mrs. Gable, a kind but firm woman, gently held his collar. "Just for a little while, Buddy," she murmured, her voice laced with sympathy. "Just for a little while." But her words were lost in the chaotic symphony of Alara's sobs and the grating sound of the truck's engine roaring to life. As the truck pulled away, Alara pressed her face against the rear window, her hand outstretched, desperately reaching for Buddy. "Buddy, Buddy," she screamed, her voice hoarse with despair. Buddy, his heart a frantic drumbeat against his ribs, strained against Mrs. Gable's hold, his powerful body trembling. He watched, helpless, as the truck, carrying his entire world, receded into the distance, a shrinking speck until it vanished completely beyond the bend in the road. The silence that followed was deafening, a profound emptiness that swallowed the last echoes of Alara's cries. For a long moment, Buddy stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the empty road. The world had just shattered. His family, his purpose, his very existence had just driven away. Mrs. Gable, understanding the depth of his grief, knelt beside him, stroking his head. "Come on, boy," she said softly. "Let's get you inside." But Buddy barely registered her touch. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and a desperate, unwavering instinct. He had to find them. He had to go to Alara. Suddenly, with a surge of adrenaline, Buddy twisted free from Mrs. Gable's grasp. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look back. His powerful legs propelled him forward, down the dusty lane, following the fading scent of the truck, following the last faint echoes of Alara's voice. He ran with a desperate urgency, his paws pounding the earth, his golden fur a blur against the muted landscape. He ran until his lungs ached, until his muscles screamed in protest, driven by a love so profound it transcended fear and logic. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to go. The familiar path gave way to unknown stretches of road, the comforting sense of Willow Creek replaced by unfamiliar smells of exhaust fumes in distant towns. The sun climbed higher, beating down on his back, but Buddy felt no heat, only the cold grip of panic mixed with an unyielding determination. He was alone, utterly and terrifyingly alone, in a world that had suddenly turned vast and indifferent. His loyalty, however, was not indifferent. It was a burning ember in his heart, guiding him forward, a silent promise to his beloved Alara that he would find her, no matter the cost. His journey, born of a shattered world and a loyal heart, had just begun. Buddy ran until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, colors that usually brought comfort, but now only deepened his sense of isolation. His legs burned, his lungs heaved, and his once silky fur was matted with dust and sweat. When he could run no more, he collapsed by the side of an unfamiliar road, his body trembling. The world around him was silent, save for the chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl, sounds that usually meant home and safety, but now only amplified his terrifying solitude. He lifted his head, sniffing the air, desperately searching for any trace of Alara, of Silas, of the familiar sense of his old life. But there was nothing, only the smell of strange earth, unknown plants, and the faint, unsettling odor of exhaust fumes from cars that had long since passed. The immediate shock of separation had given way to a profound, aching confusion. Where were they? Why had they left him? These were questions a dog couldn't articulate, but the raw emotions behind them tore at his heart. As darkness fully enveloped him, a new sensation began to gnaw at his insides: hunger. He hadn't eaten since morning, and the exertion of his desperate flight had consumed what little energy he had. His stomach rumbled painfully, a stark reminder of his new reality. There was no Silas to prepare his food, no Alara to sneak him scraps under the table. He was utterly dependent on himself, a concept foreign and frightening to a dog who had always known abundant love and care. The cold night air began to seep into his fur, and Buddy shivered, not just from the chill, but from an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. He was used to the warmth of the cottage, the soft bed in the corner, the comforting presence of his family. Now he was exposed, an easy target for any nocturnal predator, or simply for the unforgiving elements. He curled into a tight ball, trying to conserve warmth, his nose tucked into his tail, his ears swiveling, alert to every rustle, every distant sound. Every shadow seemed to hold a potential threat, and every unfamiliar noise sent a jolt of fear through his exhausted body. Sleep offered little solace. His dreams were fragments of his old life: Alara's laughing face, Silas's gentle hand, the familiar scent of home. He would wake with a start, his heart pounding, only to be confronted again by the harsh reality of his solitude. Tears, thick and silent, welled in his eyes, blurring the outlines of the unfamiliar trees. He missed their touch, their voices, the comforting rhythm of their presence more than words could ever convey. The physical hunger was immense, but the hunger for their love, for their companionship, was an even deeper, more agonizing ache. As the first pale light of dawn touched the eastern sky, Buddy stirred. His body was stiff and sore, his stomach a hollow pit. But as the sun began its slow ascent, a different kind of feeling began to stir within him, a flicker of the same unwavering determination that had driven him the day before. He was alone, yes, but he was not without purpose. His purpose was Alara, his purpose was Silas. He would find them. He had to. With a weary sigh, Buddy pushed himself onto shaky legs, took one last look back at the empty road, and then, guided by an invisible thread of loyalty, he began to walk, taking the first tentative steps into a vast unknown world, his journey of solitude truly beginning. Days bled into weeks, each one a relentless test of Buddy's endurance. The neatly paved roads of his initial escape soon gave way to rougher terrain, winding dirt tracks, dense thickets, and stony riverbanks. His once immaculate golden coat became matted and dull, streaked with mud and burrs. His paws, accustomed to soft grass and gentle paths, were now raw and calloused, each step a testament to his unwavering will. The landscape seemed to mock his plight, offering endless stretches of indifference, punctuated by moments of stark danger. Hunger was a constant, gnawing companion. He learned to forage, a skill he'd never needed in his pampered life. He sniffed out dropped crumbs and abandoned picnic areas, cautiously approached the edges of human settlements for discarded food, and even, in desperation, hunted small rodents, a primal instinct kicking in to override his gentle nature. The taste of victory over a meager meal was fleeting, quickly replaced by the ever-present ache in his stomach. Thirst, too, became a serious concern. He sought out trickling streams and muddy puddles, often finding them contaminated or dry, forcing him to endure long stretches without water, his throat parched and aching. The natural world, once a playground, revealed its harsher side. He encountered wary deer, swift rabbits, and once, a snarling fox that challenged him for a scrap of food, sending a jolt of fear through his exhausted body. He learned to avoid the territories of aggressive wild dogs, their guttural snarls a clear warning. The nights were cold and lonely, filled with the unsettling sounds of the wilderness. He sought shelter under the low-hanging branches of trees and hollow logs, or in abandoned sheds, always vigilant, always listening, his senses heightened by the constant threat of the unknown. One particularly harrowing day, that he found himself at the edge of a vast, swiftly flowing river. It was wider and deeper than any he had known in Willow Creek, its currents powerful and unforgiving. He whimpered, pacing the bank, his instincts screaming danger. But he knew, with a certainty that transcended fear, that his family was on the other side. He could almost smell Alara's faint scent carried on the wind. With a surge of desperate courage, he plunged into the icy water, paddling furiously against the strong current. The water tugged at him, threatening to drag him under, and the effort consumed every ounce of his remaining strength. He choked on mouthfuls of water, his vision blurring, but the image of Alara's face burned bright in his mind, propelling him forward. By sheer force of will, he clawed his way to the opposite bank, collapsing onto the wet earth, gasping for breath, his body trembling uncontrollably. Every day presented a new obstacle, a new trial. Yet, through it all, Buddy's spirit remained unbroken. His loyalty was a beacon, a burning flame that refused to be extinguished by hunger, fear, or exhaustion. Each sunrise brought renewed hope, a fresh resolve to continue his relentless search. He was driven by a single, powerful purpose: to find his family. His journey was a testament to the endearing power of love, transforming a once pampered pet into a resilient survivor, traversing perilous paths with an empty belly but a heart full of unwavering devotion. After weeks of relentless travel, marked by the constant ache of hunger and the gnawing grip of loneliness, Buddy's once robust frame had become gaunt, his ribs starkly visible beneath his matted fur. He was a shadow of his former self, moving with a weary, almost mechanical gait. He had learned to be wary of humans, most of whom either ignored him, shooed him away, or worse, reacted with fear or hostility. His trust, once freely given, was now a precious commodity, rarely extended. She slowly reached for the plate of chicken scraps, her movements deliberate and unthreatening. Buddy watched her every move, his body tensed, ready to flee at the slightest sign of aggression, but her eyes held only warmth. She placed the plate gently on the ground, a few feet from him. "Here you go, boy," she murmured. "Eat up." The aroma was overwhelming. Buddy hesitated for only a second, then cautiously approached, his tail wagging a little more confidently now. He devoured the food in a few gulps, savoring every morsel, a forgotten pleasure. The woman watched him, a soft smile on her lips. Despite the brief comfort offered by Mrs. Peterson, the road stretched endlessly before Buddy, each day blurring into the next. Weeks turned into months, and the seasons began their slow, inexorable march. The vibrant greens of summer had faded into the golden hues of autumn, and the air carried the crisp, melancholic scent of falling leaves. Buddy's journey had taken him through diverse landscapes, dense forests, open plains, and the periphery of bustling towns, but none had yielded the familiar faces he so desperately sought. His body, once sturdy and resilient, now bore the unmistakable marks of a long, brutal struggle. His fur was dull, his once bright eyes were often clouded with weariness, and his gait had a pronounced limp from an old injury that never quite healed. He was a survivor, yes, but the constant battle against hunger, thirst, cold, and the ever-present threat of danger had taken a heavy toll. There were days when the sheer weight of his solitude pressed down on him with crushing force. Days when the memories of Alara and Silas, once a beacon of hope, twisted into a painful reminder of what he had lost. He would often find himself curling up in some desolate corner, whimpering softly, his body racked not just by physical pain, but by an overwhelming, soul-deep despair. He missed the warmth of Alara's hand in his fur, the comforting scratch behind his ears from Silas, the sound of their voices, even the mundane routines of their days. The loneliness was a physical ache, a constant companion that whispered doubts into his weary mind. Had they forgotten him? Were they even looking for him? The possibility, though unbearable, began to creep into his thoughts, threatening to extinguish the last flickering embers of his hope. One particularly cold, rainy night, Buddy found shelter under a broken-down bridge. The wind howled, carrying with it the icy sting of winter's approach, and the relentless rain soaked him to the bone. He shivered uncontrollably, his teeth chattering, his body racked by a deep cough. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, and the cold was seeping into his very bones. In that moment of utter desolation, lying shivering in the damp earth, the shadow of despair loomed large, threatening to consume him entirely. He closed his eyes, wishing for the sweet oblivion of sleep, to escape the agonizing reality of his existence. But even in that darkest hour, a faint image flickered in his mind's eye. Alara's face, her youthful smile, the way her eyes would light up when he greeted her. He remembered her scent, the softness of her touch, the unwavering love in her gaze. And then Silas, his steady presence, his quiet strength. These memories, though painful, were also his lifeline. They were the reason he had started this impossible journey, and they were the only reason he would continue. He would not give up. Not yet. Not while there was still a whisper of their existence in his heart. With a tremendous effort, Buddy pushed himself up, his body protesting every movement. He limped out from under the bridge, his gaze fixed on the faint promise of dawn breaking through the stormy clouds. The despair was still there, a heavy cloak, but underneath it, the flame of loyalty, though flickering, still burned. He would endure. He would survive. He would find them. His journey through hunger and tears was far from over, and he knew, deep in his heart, that the greatest test of his spirit was yet to come. Just when the shadow of despair seemed to stretch its longest, a faint, almost imperceptible shift occurred in Buddy's world. He was scavenging near the outskirts of a small town, his nose to the ground, when a particular breeze carried a wisp of a scent that sent a jolt through his weary body, awakening senses that had become dulled by weeks of hardship. It was faint, almost a phantom, but undeniably familiar. A memory of Silas's pipe tobacco, mingled with Alara's favorite lavender soap, and the distinctive aroma of the old woolen blanket they often shared by the fire. It was the scent of home, or at least a ghost of it. Buddy froze, his head snapping up, his nostrils flaring. He took a deep, shaky breath, trying to pinpoint the source. The scent was elusive, carried on the capricious wind, but it was there, a thread of gold in a tapestry of mundane smells. It was enough. It was more than enough. The exhaustion that had been weighing him down seemed to momentarily lift, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and a renewed, fierce hope. He began to move, not with the aimless wandering of a stray, but with the focused determination of a dog on a mission. He followed the scent, his pace quickening, his nose to the ground, meticulously tracking every subtle shift in the air. The trail was frustratingly intermittent, sometimes strong enough to almost bring tears to his eyes, other times vanishing completely, leaving him to circle frantically, whimpering in frustration. He understood with an innate canine logic that this wasn't a direct path, but rather the remnants of a journey, perhaps a place where his family had paused, or where an item belonging to them had been left behind. It was a cold trail, but it was asterisk their asterisk trail, and that was all that mattered. The scent led him through winding country roads, past fields now barren from the approaching winter, and occasionally through the edges of forgotten hamlets. He passed an old, dilapidated gas station, the scent briefly strengthening around a discarded coffee cup, only to fade again. He knew instinctively that this wasn't their current location, but a signpost, a breadcrumb left in the vast wilderness of his search. Each faint whiff was a victory, a reaffirmation that he wasn't entirely alone in his quest, that they existed, and that he was, however slowly, getting closer. His body still ached, and hunger was a constant companion, but the despair that had threatened to consume him was now held at bay by this new, powerful motivation. The memory of Valara's face, once a distant comfort, now felt closer, more tangible. He imagined her calling his name, her voice echoing in the wind, urging him forward. He pictured Silas, his quiet smile, his reassuring presence. These images fueled his weary legs, pushing him onward day after day. He learned to conserve his energy, to track with even greater precision, to discern the subtle nuances of the air currents. This faint scent, this ghost of home, had transformed his journey from a desperate, aimless wandering into a focused, purposeful quest. He was no longer just surviving. He was actively seeking, driven by an ancient, unshakable bond. The faint scent trails were leading him somewhere, and for the first time in months, Buddy felt a genuine burning hope that his long and arduous journey might indeed have an end that promised the sweet reunion he yearned for with every fiber of his being. The faint scent trails, though intermittent, eventually led Buddy to the outskirts of a sprawling city, a place vastly different from the quiet, rural landscapes he had traversed. The transition was jarring. The air, once filled with the earthy smells of forest and field, was now thick with the acrid scent of exhaust fumes, the metallic tang of industry, and a cacophony of unfamiliar noises. The distant hum of traffic grew into a deafening roar, a relentless symphony of car horns, screeching tires, and the constant murmur of human voices. This was no longer the wilderness. This was a labyrinth of concrete and steel, cold and indifferent. Buddy hesitated at the edge of the urban sprawl, his senses overwhelmed. The sheer scale of the buildings, towering monoliths that blotted out the sky, was intimidating. The streets were rivers of speeding vehicles, a terrifying spectacle for a dog accustomed to dirt roads and gentle paths. Crowds of people surged past, a faceless blur of legs and hurried footsteps, none of them pausing, none of them offering a second glance. He felt smaller, more vulnerable than ever before, swallowed by the sheer immensity and indifference of the city. Navigating this new environment was a constant challenge. He had to learn a new set of rules that were harsh and unforgiving. Crossing streets became a perilous endeavor, a terrifying dance with death as cars whizzed by, narrowly missing him. He learned to stick to the quieter alleys, to dart through parks when possible, always keeping a vigilant eye out for danger. The scents he was following became even more diluted here, lost in the overwhelming smell of the city, making his task exponentially harder. Food, too, was a different kind of struggle. While there were more discarded scraps and bins and on sidewalks, the competition was fierce. Other stray animals, hardened by urban life, were territorial and aggressive. He had to be quick, stealthy, and sometimes bold, to snatch a morsel before it was claimed by another or swept away by sanitation workers. He learned the rhythm of the city's waste, knowing when and where restaurants would throw out their leftovers, becoming a phantom in the urban jungle, a master of survival in the shadows. The nights in the city were not quiet like the countryside. They hummed with a low, continuous energy, punctuated by sirens, distant music, and the occasional shouts of humans. He found shelter in forgotten corners, under parked cars, behind overflowing dumpsters, or in derelict buildings. The cold, hard concrete offered little comfort, and the constant noise made restful sleep a luxury he rarely afforded himself. Yet, even amidst this overwhelming chaos, the image of Ilara's face, the memory of her laughter, remained a guiding light, a silent promise he clung to with every fiber of his being. His loyalty, once tested by hunger and the elements, was now confronted by the crushing anonymity and danger of the city. He was a small golden speck in a vast, uncaring machine, but he refused to be ground down. He knew, with an unwavering certainty, that his family must be somewhere within this sprawling maze. He would continue his search, one careful step at a time, through the city's labyrinth, his heart beating with a relentless rhythm of hope and an unyielding devotion. The city, initially a terrifying maze, slowly began to reveal its patterns and rhythms to Buddy. What was once an overwhelming cacophony of sights and sounds transformed, through sheer necessity, into a complex map of opportunities and threats. He became a ghost in the urban landscape, moving with a newfound stealth and efficiency. His senses, already acute, sharpened further, adapting to the nuanced language of the streets. He learned to read the subtle cues of human behavior, distinguishing between those who might offer a crumb of kindness and those who posed a potential threat. His foraging skills evolved from desperate scavenging into a finely honed art. He discovered that the alleys behind restaurants were treasure troves, especially late at night after the last patrons had departed. He learned to identify the distinctive scent of overflowing dumpsters and the specific days for trash collection, when bags would be left out, sometimes torn, offering a chance at discarded food. He became adept at prying open loosely lidded bins, his strong jaws and clever paws working in concert to access the hidden sustenance within. But survival in the city was not just about finding food, it was about avoiding danger. Buddy quickly learned the routes of the animal control vans, their distinctive rumble a signal for him to disappear into the shadows. He understood the unspoken territories of other stray dogs, choosing to skirt around their domains rather than engage in potentially deadly conflicts. He became a master of evasion, slipping through narrow gaps, scaling low fences, and finding refuge in hidden nooks and crannies that most humans would never notice. His golden fur, once a beacon, now served as camouflage in the dim light of alleyways, helping him blend into the urban grime. He learned to nap during the quieter hours of the day, often choosing sun-warmed patches of pavement or the shadowed recesses of abandoned construction sites. His sleep was light, always ready to spring to attention at the slightest disturbance. The constant need for vigilance was exhausting, but it was the price of survival. His once gentle demeanor had been tempered by the harsh realities of street life. He was still a loyal, loving dog at heart, but he now carried a wariness, a street-smart edge that ensured his continued existence. One evening, while sheltering from a sudden downpour, he watched a group of children playing in a park across the street. A pang of profound longing shot through him. He saw a little girl with hair the color of autumn leaves chasing a ball, her laughter echoing in the rain-washed air. For a moment, his heart ached with an unbearable intensity. He imagined Ilara, her familiar scent, her joyous embrace. The vision renewed his strength, reminding him why he endured this ceaseless struggle. He was not merely surviving. He was surviving asterisk for them asterisk. Every successful meal, every evaded danger, was a step closer to his goal. The city's labyrinth had forced him to become a scavenger, a survivor, but it could not extinguish the burning flame of his loyalty, the singular purpose that continued to drive his every weary, determined step. Buddy's life in the city had settled into a precarious routine of survival, but the constant threat of capture was an ever-present shadow. He had learned to recognize the distinct sound of the animal control truck, its approaching rumble sending a shiver of dread down his spine. He knew the faces of the local officers, their determined expressions, and the nets they carried. He had witnessed other strays, less fortunate or less wary, being rounded up, their panicked barks fading into the distance, and the sight fueled his resolve to remain free. He couldn't risk being locked away. He had a family to find. One crisp autumn morning, a day that had started like any other, Buddy was cautiously making his way through a quiet residential neighborhood, hoping for a discarded breakfast. He had just spotted a half-eaten sandwich near a mailbox when he heard it, the unmistakable purr of the animal control vehicle, closer than he had ever heard it before. He froze, his ears swiveling, trying to pinpoint its location. Too late. As he turned, a white van rounded the corner, its side emblazoned with the city's animal services logo. 2 officers were inside, their eyes scanning the sidewalks. Panic surged through Buddy. He bolted, abandoning the sandwich, his powerful legs propelling him down the street. The van sped up, its engine roaring, and one of the officers leaned out, a net in his hand. "Hey, dog." "Stop," a voice boomed, but Buddy ignored it, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He dodged behind a parked car, then another, weaving through fences and narrow gaps between houses, his body a blur of golden fur. The chase was relentless. The officers, clearly determined, cut him off at one turn, forcing him into a dead-end alley. Buddy skidded to a halt, his chest heaving, his eyes darting frantically for an escape route. The alley was lined with tall brick walls, offering no way out. The officers advanced, their steps slow and deliberate, their nets held ready. Buddy snarled, a low, guttural sound, a warning born of desperation. He wouldn't go quietly. He couldn't. Just as one officer lunged with the net, Buddy spotted it, a small, dark opening at the base of the brick wall, almost completely hidden by overgrown ivy. It was a drainage pipe, barely wide enough for him, but it was his only chance. With a burst of renewed energy, he squeezed through the narrow opening, scraping his fur, feeling the rough concrete against his body. He heard the frustrated shouts of the officers behind him, the thud of the net hitting the wall, but he didn't stop. He scrambled through the dark, damp pipe, emerging on the other side into a tangle of overgrown bushes, unseen. He lay there for a long moment, hidden and trembling, listening until the sounds of the officers and their van faded into the distance. The escape had been harrowing, a stark reminder of the constant peril he faced. He was safe for now, but the experience had shaken him to his core. He was still free, still able to continue his search, but the brush with capture had reinforced the precariousness of his existence and the absolute necessity of vigilance. He couldn't afford to be caught, not when Alara and Silas were still out there waiting for him. His journey, though fraught with danger, had to continue, unimpeded by human intervention. The near capture left Buddy shaken, his nerves frayed, but it also reinforced his resolve. He knew he couldn't afford to get caught. His freedom was paramount to his mission. After his harrowing escape, he sought refuge in a secluded, overgrown lot behind an abandoned warehouse, a place where the city's relentless hum was somewhat muted. The day had been emotionally and physically draining, and as night fell, bringing with it a biting chill, a profound weariness settled over him. He curled into the tightest ball he could manage, his nose tucked into his tail, trying to find some warmth on the cold, damp ground. His stomach growled, a hollow, aching protest, and his muscles twitched from the day's exertion. The loneliness, a constant companion, pressed in on him, heavier than usual. In moments like these, when the present was so bleak, his mind would drift, seeking solace in the vivid tapestry of his past. He closed his eyes, and the memories began to play like a cherished film reel in his mind. He saw Alara, a tiny whirlwind of energy, chasing him through the sun-dappled fields of Willow Creek, her laughter echoing like wind chimes. He remembered the feel of her small hands burying themselves in his fur, the warmth of her cheek pressed against his head as she whispered secrets into his ear. He recalled the games they played, the sticks she threw, the joyful splashes in the river, her voice calling his name, full of pure, unadulterated love. Then came Silas, his steady presence, his quiet strength. Buddy remembered the gentle scratch behind his ears, the deep rumble of Silas's voice as he read stories by the fireplace. Buddy curled at his feet, soaking in the warmth and the peace. He remembered the comforting smell of Silas's pipe tobacco, the taste of the special treats the old man would sometimes sneak him under the table. He could almost feel the calloused hand stroking his head, a gesture of profound affection and understanding. These memories weren't just fleeting images. They were sensations, emotions, a vibrant reliving of a love that was his entire world. He felt the warmth of their touch, heard the music of their voices, smelled the familiar sense of home. Tears, hot and silent, welled in his eyes and streamed down his matted fur. It was a bittersweet pain, a profound longing for what was lost, but also a powerful reminder of what he was fighting for. These were not just memories. They were his fuel, his reason, his unwavering motivation. As the night deepened and the city slept its fitful sleep, Buddy lay there, wrapped in the embrace of his past. The cold, the hunger, the danger, they were still there, but they felt a little less overwhelming, a little less crushing. The love he had known, the bond he shared with Alara and Silas, was a powerful force, an unbreakable thread connecting him to them across unknown distances and untold hardships. He would not let them down, he would not give up. With a renewed sense of purpose, Buddy finally drifted into a fitful sleep, his dreams filled not with despair, but with the warm, comforting echoes of home and the unwavering promise that he would find his way back to them. Buddy's journey through the city continued, each day a painstaking effort of survival and search. He learned to listen, not just with his ears, but with his entire being, for any hint, any clue that might lead him closer to Alara and Silas. The familiar scents he occasionally caught were now so faint, so diluted by the city's myriad smells, that they were like wisps of smoke, difficult to follow. One afternoon, he found himself resting in a small, neglected park, hidden beneath a sprawling willow tree. Children played nearby, their laughter a cheerful counterpoint to the city's drone. He watched them with a wistful ache in his heart, remembering Alara's boundless energy. As he lay there, half dozing, a snippet of conversation drifted towards him from a nearby park bench. Two elderly women, their voices soft and gentle, were discussing their families. "My granddaughter, Alara," one woman said, her voice laced with affection. "She's finally settled in Havenwood with her grandfather. It's been such a trying time for them, losing their farm in Willow Creek, but they're making a fresh start." The words hit Buddy like a physical blow. His head snapped up, his ears perked, every fiber of his being suddenly alert. Asterisk Alara, asterisk asterisk Willow Creek, asterisk asterisk Havenwood, asterisk, the names, distinct and clear, resonated deep within him. He scrambled to his feet, his tail giving a tentative, excited wag. He had heard her name. And a town, Havenwood. It was a real place, a destination, not just a vague hope. He watched the women, trying to absorb every word, every nuance. They continued to chat, sharing details about Alara's new life, the small apartment, the challenges of adjusting. Buddy couldn't understand the specifics, but the names, the location were enough. It was a sign, a direct confirmation that his family was indeed out there, and he now had a potential direction. The energy that surged through him was immense, chasing away the fatigue and the lingering despair. It was as if a heavy fog had lifted, revealing a clear path forward. He had been wandering, guided by instinct and faint traces, but now he had a name, a destination, Havenwood. The sound of it was a balm to his weary soul, a promise whispered directly into his heart. He stayed hidden, listening until the women eventually gathered their things and walked away, their conversation fading into the distance. Once they were gone, Buddy emerged from his hiding spot, his tail now wagging with a renewed vigor. His eyes, once clouded with weariness, now shone with a fierce determination. The city, which had felt like an endless labyrinth, now had an exit, a direction. He began to move with a newfound purpose, no longer simply scavenging for survival, but actively searching for a way out, for the road that would lead him to Havenwood. The journey would still be long, the challenges immense, but the whisper of a name, a precious clue overheard by chance, had transformed his solitary quest into a directed mission. He would find Havenwood, and he would find his family. His heart, brimming with a powerful, burning hope, echoed the name, *Havenwood*. With the name Havenwood burning bright in his mind, Buddy's focus sharpened with an almost laser-like intensity. He was no longer just a stray wandering aimlessly. He was a navigator, a tracker with a singular destination. He began to observe maps displayed on bus stops and public information boards, his intelligent eyes trying to decipher the complex lines and symbols, though their true meaning eluded him. Instead, he relied on his keen sense of direction, the subtle shifts in the flow of traffic, and the occasional directional signs he could interpret, even if only partially. His journey out of the city was as arduous as his journey into it. He spent days skirting the industrial edges, following railway lines and lesser-used roads, always heading in what he instinctively felt was the right direction. The concrete jungle slowly gave way to suburban sprawl, then to smaller towns, and finally, back to the open countryside he knew so well. The air grew cleaner, the sound softened, and the familiar sense of earth and growing things returned, bringing with them a comforting sense of familiarity. He still faced the same relentless challenges of hunger and thirst, but now they were endured with a purpose, a destination in mind. Each empty stomach, each aching paw, was a sacrifice for the greater goal. He learned to ask for help more directly, approaching solitary farmhouses with a hopeful wag of his tail, his pleading eyes often softening the hearts of the residents. He was no longer just a hardened street dog. He was a dog on a pilgrimage, and a few kind souls seemed to sense his deep-seated mission, offering him scraps or a bowl of water. The landscape began to change, subtly at first, then more distinctly. The rolling hills were replaced by flatter plains, dotted with different types of trees and crops. The rivers he crossed were wider, more placid. He felt the pull of the new region, a distinct energy that was different from Willow Creek, yet held the promise of Havenwood. He was moving away from his past, but towards his future, towards his family. Days turned into nights, nights into days, each one a testament to his relentless determination. He covered vast distances, his body a testament to his endurance. His paws were sore, his fur was still matted, but his spirit was ignited by the burning hope of reunion. He imagined Alara's surprise, Silas's quiet joy. These visions were more potent than any physical discomfort, pushing him forward when his body screamed for rest. He often dreamt of Havenwood, a place he had never seen, but which, in his mind, was a sanctuary where his family awaited. He pictured a bustling town, but one with the warmth and familiarity of a home. He saw Alara, older perhaps, but still his Alara, her arms open, ready to embrace him. These dreams, fueled by the whispers of a name, were his constant companions, his silent motivators. The long road to Havenwood was arduous, fraught with unseen dangers and relentless hardship, but Buddy walked it with a heart full of unwavering loyalty, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where he hoped his long-lost family awaited him. His journey was nearing its most critical phase, where hope and perseverance would finally be put to the ultimate test. After what felt like an eternity, Buddy sensed a definitive shift. The open plains began to give way to more settled farmland, then to clusters of houses, and eventually a distinct village. The air, though still carrying the general sense of a human settlement, began to weave in faint, almost forgotten fragrances: wood smoke, freshly baked bread, and a subtle, indefinable something that tugged at the deepest recesses of his memory. It wasn't Willow Creek, not exactly, but it felt kindred. He approached the village cautiously, his instincts honed by months of survival. The streets were quieter than the city, lined with quaint shops and houses that had a lived-in feel. People moved at a slower pace, some pausing to chat, others tending to small gardens. Buddy kept to the periphery, observing, sniffing, searching for any stronger trace of his family. His heart was a drumbeat against his ribs, a mixture of anticipation and fear. Could this truly be Havenwood? Could they be here? As he turned a corner, a sight arrested him, stopping him dead in his tracks. There, at the end of a narrow lane, stood a small two-story building with a distinctive, slightly crooked chimney. It was a general store, and pinned to its wooden porch post was a faded, hand-painted sign, Silas and Alara's General Goods. His breath hitched. It was a simple sign, perhaps recently put up, but the names were unmistakable. Silas, Alara, his family, his world. Buddy stared at the sign, his eyes wide with disbelief, then with overwhelming joy. A whine, soft and choked with emotion, escaped his throat. He looked around, trying to process the magnitude of what he was seeing. This wasn't just a faint scent or a distant whisper. This was a tangible sign, a solid piece of evidence that his long, arduous journey had led him to the right place. He was in Havenwood, and his family was here. His body, weary and aching moments before, now felt a surge of adrenaline, a renewed vitality. He began to tremble, not from cold or fear, but from the sheer, overwhelming emotion of it all. He took a tentative step down the lane, then another, his eyes fixed on the general store. The scent of Alara, faint but undeniable, was now stronger, mingled with the familiar, comforting aroma of Silas's pipe tobacco. It was the scent of home, of belonging, a symphony of memories that flooded his senses. He was almost there. After months of perilous paths, empty bellies, and the crushing weight of loneliness, he stood on a familiar lane, gazing at a sign that bore the names of his beloved humans. The anticipation was almost unbearable, a sweet, agonizing ache in his chest. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the moment he had dreamt of, yearned for, and fought for with every fiber of his being. The long road had finally led him home to the very doorstep of his family, and his heart pounded with the promise of reunion, a culmination of through hunger and tears. The sign, Silas and Alara's General Goods, was a beacon, drawing Buddy forward with an irresistible force. He approached the store with a mixture of reverence and frantic urgency, his tail wagging furiously, a low, excited whimper rumbling in his chest. Every step brought a stronger, more intoxicating wave of familiar scents. Alara's unique perfume, a blend of lavender and sunshine. Silas's earthy scent, tinged with pipe tobacco and old wood. It was the smell of his world, the scent of home, a fragrance he had chased across countless miles and through untold hardships. He reached the wooden porch, his paws scraping gently on the worn planks. The door to the general store was ajar, allowing a sliver of warm light and the murmur of voices to escape. Buddy pressed his nose to the crack, inhaling deeply, confirming what his eyes had already told him. They were inside. His family was just beyond this door. The realization was almost too much to bear, a wave of emotion so profound it made his entire body tremble. He pushed the door open a fraction wider with his nose, peeking inside. The store was small but cozy, filled with shelves stacked with various goods, dried herbs, canned foods, simple fabrics. And there, behind a worn wooden counter, stood Silas, his back to Buddy. His silver hair a little thinner, his shoulders a little more stooped, but unmistakably him. He was talking to a customer. His voice, though aged, still held the familiar cadence Buddy remembered. His heart soared. Then a flash of autumn-colored hair caught his eye. Alara. She was older now, perhaps a year or two more mature, her face still bright, but with a new quiet dignity. She was arranging jars of preserves on a shelf, her movements graceful and familiar. She looked up, her gaze sweeping across the store, and for a terrifying moment, Buddy thought she might see him. He ducked back, his heart pounding, a mixture of fear and overwhelming joy. He wanted to burst in, to bark, to leap into her arms, but something held him back. A sudden shyness, perhaps, or the overwhelming impact of the moment. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. He had waited so long, endured so much. He wouldn't rush this. He would make his presence known in a way that would be unmistakable, undeniable. He would wait for the perfect moment. He stood on the porch, his eyes fixed on the open doorway, his entire being focused on the two figures inside. The warmth of their presence, the comforting familiarity of their voices, the overwhelming sense of home, it was all here, real and tangible, after months of being a distant dream. Suddenly, Alara laughed, a light, melodious sound that sent a jolt of pure joy through Buddy. It was the same laugh he remembered from Willow Creek, the sound that could chase away any shadow. That was his cue. With a final, determined push, Buddy nudged the door fully open and stepped inside, his tail wagging with a fervor that threatened to dislodge his entire body. He let out a soft, hopeful whine, a sound that he hoped would penetrate the bustle of the store and reach the ears of his beloved family. The moment of reunion, the culmination of his arduous journey through hunger and tears, was finally at hand, and his heart was ready to burst with a love that had defied all odds. As Buddy stepped inside the general store, his soft whine, though barely audible over the chatter of customers, was enough. Alara, her back still to him, paused in her task of tidying shelves. A flicker of something, a subconscious recognition perhaps, made her turn her head slightly. Silas, at the counter, was mid-sentence with a customer when Buddy let out another, slightly louder whine, a sound laced with desperate hope. This time, Silas's head snapped up. His eyes, though tired, scanned the small store. He saw Buddy standing just inside the doorway, a lean, matted, golden shadow against the bright afternoon light. For a long moment, Silas simply stared, his face a mixture of disbelief and profound shock. The customer he was speaking to noticed his sudden silence and followed his gaze. "Is that a stray, Silas?" she asked gently. Silas didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on Buddy, tracing the familiar lines of his body, the unique way his head was held. But this dog was so thin, so weathered, so different from the plump, pampered Buddy he remembered. Could it really be? His heart hammered against his ribs, a wild, hopeful drum. He took a hesitant step from behind the counter, his eyes never leaving the dog. Alara, hearing her grandfather's unusual silence, finally turned fully. Her eyes, initially dismissive of a common stray, widened in an instant. Her breath caught in her throat. She saw the golden fur, the intelligent eyes, the way the tail was wagging with a desperate, familiar rhythm. It was Buddy. It had to be. But he was so changed, a ghost of his former self, a testament to unimaginable hardship. "Buddy?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile question filled with a year of longing and disbelief. Buddy's entire body trembled at the sound of his name, spoken by her, his Alara. He let out a joyous bark, a sound that was rough and hoarse from disuse, but brimming with unadulterated happiness. He took a tentative step towards her, then another, his tail wagging so hard his whole body swayed. Alara's eyes welled up, blurring her vision. She took a step back, then forward, her hand instinctively reaching out, then pulling back, as if afraid he might vanish like a dream. Silas, now standing beside her, placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. "It's him, Alara," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "It's our Buddy." The other customers in the store watched in stunned silence. witnessing a reunion unfolding before their eyes, a miracle in the mundane setting of a general store. Buddy, no longer hesitant, let out another joyful bark, a full-throated cry of pure, unadulterated happiness. He bounded forward, his weary legs finding a sudden, unexpected reserve of strength, his eyes fixed solely on Alara, his beloved human, who now stood before him, tears streaming down her face, her arms slowly beginning to open in a gesture of welcome he had yearned for with every fiber of his being. The distant glimpse, the moment of recognition, had finally blossomed into the reality of home. The word buddy hung in the air, a sacred utterance shattering the silence of the general store. Alara's arms, which had been tentative, now flew open wide. With a final triumphant bark, Buddy launched himself forward, a blur of golden fur and unwavering loyalty. He slammed into Alara's small frame, knocking her off balance, but she didn't care. She sank to her knees, wrapping her arms around his emaciated body, burying her face in his matted fur, sobbing uncontrollably. "Buddy, oh, Buddy, you came back," she cried, her voice choked with a raw, overwhelming mix of joy, relief, and profound love. Buddy responded with an ecstasy that transcended words. He licked her face, her hair, her hands, his tail thumping against the wooden floorboards with a force that threatened to shake the entire store. He whimpered, a symphony of happy barks and contented growls, pressing his body against hers, trying to convey a lifetime of missed affection, of endured hardship, of unwavering devotion. The scent of her, so long a distant memory, now filled his nostrils, warm and comforting, a balm to his weary soul. He was home. He was truly, finally home. Silas, his own eyes brimming with tears, knelt beside them, a shaky hand reaching out to stroke Buddy's head. "My brave boy," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "My loyal, brave boy." He couldn't speak more, the words caught in his throat by the sheer magnitude of the moment. He saw the scars on Buddy's body, the gauntness of his frame, the weariness in his eyes, and understood, with a painful clarity, the incredible journey this dog had undertaken for them. It was a testament to a love so pure, so fierce, that it had defied all odds. The customers in the store, initially stunned, now watched with misty eyes, some openly weeping, touched by the raw, powerful emotion of the reunion. They had heard whispers of the family's hardship, of their lost dog, but to witness this miraculous return was to believe in the endearing power of love. The store, usually a place of quiet commerce, was transformed into a sanctuary of profound human-animal connection. For a long time, Alara simply held Buddy, her face buried in his fur as if afraid he would disappear if she let go. Buddy, for his part, remained pressed against her, soaking in the warmth of her embrace, feeling the steady rhythm of her heart. The hunger, the cold, the fear, the loneliness, all the agonies of his journey faded into insignificance in the face of this overwhelming, absolute joy. He was no longer a lost stray. He was Buddy, Alara's Buddy, Silas's Buddy, a cherished member of a reunited family. This was the embrace of belonging, a silent promise exchanged between dog and human, a reaffirmation of a bond that time, distance, and hardship could not break. It was the culmination of countless miles and endless tears, the sweet, triumphant end to a journey through hunger and fear, now replaced by the immeasurable comfort of unconditional love. In Alara's arms, with Silas's hand on his head, Buddy felt a peace deeper than any he had ever known, knowing that he had finally found his way back to the only place he ever truly belonged. The initial euphoria of Buddy's return gradually settled into a profound, comforting peace. The days that followed were a testament to the healing power of love. Buddy, though still thin and bearing the scars of his incredible journey, began to transform. With regular, nourishing meals, clean water, and the constant warmth of Alara's and Silas's affection, his matted fur regained its golden sheen. His eyes sparkled with renewed vitality, and his once limping gait grew steady and strong. Alara was inseparable from him, as if making up for lost time. She would spend hours simply stroking his fur, whispering secrets into his ear, or reading aloud to him as he lay contentively at her feet. Buddy, for his part, became her shadow once more, his tale a constant rhythm of happiness. He would follow Silas around the general store, occasionally offering a soft nudge for a head scratch, his presence a quiet comfort to the old man, a living reminder of resilience and loyalty. Silas, too, found a renewed lightness in his step. Buddy's return was a miracle, a sign that even in the darkest times, hope could prevail. The quiet burden he had carried, the guilt of leaving Buddy behind, was finally lifted, replaced by a deep sense of gratitude. The general store, which had been a new venture, now felt truly like home, infused with the warmth and joy of their reunited family. The story of Buddy's journey spread through Havenwood, a tale whispered with awe and wonder, solidifying his place not just in their family, but in the heart of the community. Buddy's journey had changed them all. Alara, once a sheltered child, had matured with a deeper understanding of hardship and an even fiercer appreciation for the bonds of family. Silas, through his own trials, had learned the profound depth of his dog's loyalty, a lesson that humbled and inspired him. And Buddy, the pampered pet, had become an extraordinary survivor, a living embodiment of unwavering devotion, his spirit forged in the crucible of hunger and tears. Life in Havenwood settled into a new, comforting rhythm. Mornings began with Buddy's joyful greetings. Afternoons were filled with Alara's laughter echoing through the store, and evenings were spent by a small, crackling fire, the three of them a tableau of enduring love. Buddy would often doze, his head resting on Alara's lap, his dreams no longer filled with the terrifying solitude of the road, but with the familiar, comforting sounds and sense of his family. His journey through hunger and tears had been long and arduous, a testament to the profound, unbreakable bond between a dog and his humans. It was a story of survival, of hope, and of a loyalty that transcended all obstacles. Buddy had faced the world's harshest realities and emerged, not broken, but stronger, more loving, and more deeply cherished than ever before. His story, etched into the hearts of Alara and Silas, became a timeless tale of enduring love, a powerful reminder that some bonds are simply destined to last forever, through every joy and every tear. And in the quiet comfort of their reunited home, Buddy knew with every beat of his golden heart that he was exactly where he was meant to be, surrounded by the healing power of belonging.